Let's dive into this. A lot of people spend their lives chasing after things. They chase money, they chase success, they chase relationships, and they chase happiness. But what if I told you that chasing is actually counterproductive? When you chase something, you're coming from a place of lack, from a place of not having. And when you're focused on not having, what are you really doing? You're signaling to the universe that you don't have it, and you're reinforcing that state of lack. So what happens? You end up attracting more of that lack. But let's flip this around. Instead of chasing, what if you could attract everything you want? Now that's a completely different state of being. Attraction is about alignment. It's about becoming a vibrational match to what you desire. When you attract, you're coming from a place of wholeness, from a place of having, and that's where the magic happens. So how do you make this shift from chasing to attracting? It all begins with understanding the power of your mind and the energy you project. Most people wake up in the morning, and the first thing they do is start thinking about their problems. Those problems are circuits, memories in the brain, and every one of those memories is connected to an emotion. What are emotions? Emotions are the end product of past experiences. So when you recall those memories, you start feeling the same emotions and you relive the past. And if how you think and how you feel creates your state of being, then your entire state of being is rooted in the past. You're thinking from a place of lack and you're feeling from a place of lack. So what does that mean? It means that if you keep thinking and feeling the same way, you're going to keep creating the same life. The familiar past will become your predictable future. So what's the first step to stop chasing and start attracting? You've got to break the habit of being yourself. You've got to stop living in the past. The brain is like a record of the past. And if you keep playing that record, you'll never create anything new. So how do you do that? You start by becoming aware of your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions. Most people don't realize that by the time they're 35 years old, 95% of who they are is a set of memorized behaviors, emotional reactions, unconscious habits, and hardwired beliefs. It's like they're living on autopilot. When you're on autopilot, you're living by the same routines, the same emotions, the same thoughts. You get up, check your phone, go through the same motions every day, and nothing changes. You're reacting to life instead of creating it. So if you want to start attracting what you want, you've got to break those routines. You've got to step into the unknown. The unknown is where possibility lies. It's where you can start creating a new future. But stepping into the unknown requires you to break free from the predictable. It requires you to become aware of the programs running your life and to make conscious choices to change them. You've got to start thinking greater than how you feel. You've got to start thinking beyond your past and begin to create a vision of your future. Here's the thing. Your thoughts and emotions are incredibly powerful. They work together to shape your entire experience of life. Think of it this way. Your thoughts are like an electrical charge, and your emotions are like a magnetic charge. When these two come together, they create a powerful energy field around you. This energy field is what we call your state of being. It's like the vibe or aura that you carry with you wherever you go, and it has a big influence on what you attract into your life. Let's break this down a bit more. When you think about something, you're generating an electrical charge in the quantum field, which is the field of energy and information that surrounds and connects everything in the universe. This charge is like sending out a signal, a broadcast of your thoughts. But it doesn't stop there. Your emotions, which are the feelings that arise from your thoughts, are like the magnetic charge in this equation. They amplify the signal you're sending out. So if your thoughts are focused on lack, like not having enough money, not being loved, or not being successful, then you're generating an electrical charge of lack. And if your emotions match those thoughts, meaning you feel worried, anxious, or frustrated about not having what you want, then you're adding a strong magnetic charge to that signal. Together, your thoughts and emotions are sending out a powerful signal of lack into the quantum field. And because like attracts like, you're going to attract more lack into your life. You'll start to notice more situations where you feel like you don't have enough, where things aren't working out, or where you're struggling to get what you want. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. But here's the good news. You have the power to change this. You can shift your state of being by changing your thoughts and emotions. It all starts with becoming aware of what you're thinking and feeling. If you notice that your thoughts are focused on what you don't have or what's going wrong in your life, that's a sign that you need to make a change. Instead of thinking about lack, start focusing on what you want. What would your life look like if you had all the things you desire? How would you feel if you were already living your dream life? When you start to think in this way, you're generating a new electrical charge in the quantum field. This time, the charge is aligned with abundance, love, success, or whatever it is that you want to attract. But thoughts alone aren't enough. You need to align your emotions with these new thoughts. This means feeling the emotions you would feel if you already had what you wanted. If you're focusing on abundance, start feeling grateful for all the abundance that's already in your life, no matter how small it might seem. If you're focusing on love, feel the love that's already present in your life, even if it's just the love you have for yourself or for a pet. The key is to feel the emotions that match the thoughts of what you want to create. When your thoughts and emotions are in alignment, you're sending out a very different signal into the quantum field. You're no longer broadcasting lack, but abundance. You're no longer focused on what's missing, but on what's possible. And because like attracts like, you'll start to attract experiences, opportunities, and people that match this new state of being. You'll start to notice things falling into place more easily. You might find that opportunities for success start showing up, or that you meet people who can help you on your journey. You might start to feel more loved and supported, or you might notice that your finances start to improve. This isn't magic. It's simply the natural result of shifting your energy. This is where the work begins. You've got to take time every day to disconnect from the outer world and connect with your inner world. Shut off the distractions, close your eyes, and go within. Start by centering yourself in the present moment. The present moment is where all creation happens. When you're truly present, you have the power to create anything you desire. Begin by asking yourself, what do I really want? Take the time to answer that question. When you start contemplating and thinking about the answer, you're already changing your brain. You're making your brain fire in new ways, creating new connections, and that's the first step to changing your mind. Once you're clear on what you want, the next step is to teach your body emotionally what that future will feel like. This is critical because your body is your unconscious mind. It doesn't know the difference between a real experience and one that's vividly imagined. So if you can create the feeling of that future in your body right now, you're signaling to your body that the future is happening now. You're conditioning your body to a new mind. Now let's talk about the power of mental rehearsal. When you close your eyes and mentally rehearse the actions you'll take, the behaviors you'll demonstrate, and the choices you'll make in your future, you're installing the neurological hardware in your brain to look like the experience has already happened. Your brain becomes a map to your future, not a record of your past. And if you keep rehearsing and conditioning your body to those new feelings, your hardware becomes a software program, and you start acting in a way that aligns with your future. You see, most of us have been taught to live our lives based on a model of cause and effect. We've been conditioned to believe that something needs to happen in our external world before we can feel a certain way on the inside. For example, we think we need to achieve success in our careers before we can feel empowered. We think we need to have a certain amount of money in the bank before we can feel abundant. We believe we need to find the perfect partner before we can feel love, or we think we need to recover fully from an illness before we can feel whole and healthy. This is how most people live. waiting for something outside of them to change how they feel inside. But here's the thing, this approach is based on the old model of reality. It's the model of cause and effect. In this model, we're constantly reacting to the world around us. We're letting external circumstances dictate our internal state. We're giving our power away to things outside of us, believing that our happiness, our joy, our fulfillment, and our sense of well-being depend on something or someone else. This way of thinking keeps us stuck in a cycle of waiting, hoping, and wishing for things to be different. And as long as we're waiting for something outside of us to change, we're not taking control of our own destiny. But there's a new model of reality that turns this old way of thinking on its head. Instead of waiting for something external to happen before we can feel a certain way, we start by feeling that way first. We take control of our internal state, and by doing so, we begin to influence the external world around us. This is the model of causing an effect. It's about being proactive instead of reactive. It's about taking responsibility for how we feel, regardless of what's happening around us. So instead of waiting for success to feel empowered, we start feeling empowered now. We cultivate that sense of power and confidence within ourselves, even if we haven't achieved all of our goals yet. And by feeling empowered now, we begin to attract the experiences, opportunities, and people that align with that feeling of empowerment. Similarly, instead of waiting for wealth to feel abundant, we begin to feel abundant right now. We focus on the abundance that's already present in our lives. Whether it's the love of family and friends, the beauty of nature, or the simple pleasures of daily life. When we feel abundant now, we start to draw more abundance into our lives because we're sending out the signal that we're already in that state of abundance. The same goes for love and healing. Instead of waiting for the perfect partner to feel love, we start by feeling love within ourselves. We cultivate a sense of self-love and appreciation, and we radiate that love out into the world. By doing so, we attract more love into our lives because we're already in a state of love. And instead of waiting to be fully healed before we can feel whole, we start by feeling whole and complete now. We focus on the parts of ourselves that are already healthy and strong, and we nurture those aspects of ourselves. By feeling whole now, we support our body's natural ability to heal and recover. When we make this shift from the old model of cause and effect to the new model of causing an effect, we take back our power. We become the creators of our own reality. We realize that our thoughts, feelings, and beliefs have a profound impact on the world around us. We understand that by changing our internal state, we can change our external circumstances. But here's where most people get stuck. They don't believe it. They're so used to the old way of being, of reacting to life, that when they start doing this work, they don't see results immediately and they give up. They start doubting, and that doubt becomes their reality. But here's the truth. The universe doesn't work on your timeline. It works on its own timeline, and sometimes things take time to manifest because the universe is aligning everything perfectly for you. So you've got to trust the process. You've got to stay consistent, and you've got to believe that what you're doing is working, even if you don't see the evidence right away. When you're truly committed to this process, you start living in a state of gratitude. Gratitude is one of the highest frequencies you can emit. When you're grateful, you're telling the universe that you've already received what you desire. You're signaling that it's already done, and the universe responds by giving you more to be grateful for. So before you go to sleep at night, take a moment to feel gratitude for the life you're creating. Feel it as if it's already happened. This will amplify your signal and accelerate the manifestation process. To attract everything you want, you need to break free from the past, step into the unknown, and start creating a vision of your future. You need to align your thoughts and emotions with that vision and condition your body to that new reality. You need to rehearse it daily, stay consistent, trust the process, and live in a state of gratitude. When you do this, you'll stop chasing and start attracting everything you want into your life. that emotion, you're in the emotion, which means you're in the chemical residue of the past, is going to call up the event because you're emotionally connected to it. And you're going to say, I'm this way because of that past experience. So then imagine what I do with people. We have people that have been abused. We have people that have been traumatized, that have been assaulted. We have people that have had very, very difficult pasts. And have you ever heard me say to revisit the event? Have you ever heard me say that? Never do we need to revisit the event, because once you do, you open the box. But what we want to do is overcome the emotion, because that's just what's lasting from the event. So you sit a person down, and the moment you sit them down, what do you think the body's going to do? It's going to look for something to recreate that emotion, because that's the person's identity. Are you with me still? So if I make the person, if I inspire the person to sit there, and they're sitting there, and all of a sudden they're noticing that they're hot and they're irritated and their stomach is twisting, and all of a sudden it's a group of sensations, a group of feelings that they have called all along frustration. But the different sensations, the moment you name it, it becomes an emotion. But what it is just bodily sensations. It's energy that's stuck in the body. So then I started seeing, okay, let's see if we can teach this, be able to reproduce the outcome, because that's science, right? The first one was that they all believed and accepted that there was an intelligence that lived within them that was giving them life. And then these people you interviewed who had had injuries that overcame. No, these are people were with cancer, MS, Lou. This Parkinson's disease got better. Yeah, just spontaneously, it's called a spontaneous for you. I mean, so I believe there was an intelligence, there was some invisible life force they were connected to that. They felt like they had lost their connection till they became separate and disconnected from. And that when they got the diagnosis, they woke up and said, man, I got to connect again, and I got to connect to my essence. And so they developed a relationship with it. Just like you develop a relationship with anybody, it takes time. You got to be present. You got to connect. You got to experience. You got to be present. All of these things are important elements. So that was the first thing. The second thing was that they realized that it was the mismanagement of their emotions and the hormones of stress that really began to create their condition. Now stress is when your brain and body are knocked out of balance. The stress is when your body's not that of homeostasis. We have an innate mechanism in our body that returns us back to order. So then if someone cuts you off on the LA freeway, you have an emotional reaction, but 15 minutes later, you're back to driving and you're over it, right? That's all organisms in nature can tolerate short-term stress. Everyone's all day long, all week, all year. Yeah, so if you're reacting to like a Tyrannosaurus, Rex is chasing you, you have to make a decision. Am I going to use 20% of my energy? I'm going to use 100%. So it turns out when you're reacting to traffic 200%, all right, after reacting to your coworker sitting in the cubicle next to you, you're turning on that response, and what was once very adaptive becomes very maladaptive. Because when you turn on the stress response and you can't turn it off now, you're headed for disease, because nobody can live in emergency mode for that extended period of time. Well, human beings, we can turn on the stress response just by thought alone. You can think about your problems and you're producing the same biological effects. So those chemicals give the brain and body a rush of energy, and people become addicted to that rush of energy. So now they use the problems and conditions in their life to reaffirm their addiction to that emotion. They need the bad job, they need the poor relationship. So that means they become addicted to the life that they don't even like. Why do we need the bad job or bad relationship and stay stuck? Because it's a conditioned response. So listen, if you get angry at a coworker and all of a sudden you get arousal in your brain and body, right? You get a rush of energy. When you start noticing that your body starts dropping, your brain starts noticing your energy starts dropping, you're automatically going to have the image of the coworker in order to give your body the jolt. Right? So all of a sudden people become addicted to their own thoughts, right? So these people realize that, oh my God, I've been mismanaging my attention and energy, and I got it. I got to get beyond my past. I got to get beyond these emotions. I got to make some big changes. I got to break the habit of being myself. I got to stop being this person. Now that sounds really good theoretically and philosophically, but change is such a hard thing. All right, because the moment you come back to your senses and you step back into your life and you see that person, or you go to that place, or you're with that experience, so many people are unconsciously reacting in their thoughts and feelings to everything in their environment. So now their environment is controlling how they think and feel. So they realize that in order to change, they've got to be greater than their environment, greater than the conditions in the world, greater than the circumstances in life. Be mindful of that every time it comes up, to be like, okay, I'm going to think differently. I'm not going to react this way. I'm not going to go back. I'm not going to go back, because the moment you start reacting emotionally, emotions are a record of the past. And if those emotions are driving your thoughts, you're thinking in the past. And if you can't think greater than how you feel, and you believe your thoughts have something to do with your destiny, you're creating more of your past, right? So it turns out that the repetition of thinking and feeling and thinking, these loops that people get caught in, condition their body to subconsciously become the mind of that emotion, which means now their unconscious mind is believing they're living in the same past experience, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. I kind of move past the word visualization because I think it kind of conjures up a little bit too much of a spiritual association. The word that's used in science is called mental rehearsal. In mental rehearsal, there's two types of mental rehearsal. There's what's called internal mental imaging, which means you're in the scene as the first person experiencing it. And then there's called external mental imaging, which is you're observing yourself in the scene. Turns out that when you are actually in the first person and not the third person, that action of rehearsing what you're doing produces the strong biological change. Now let's talk about this. You can take a group of people that have never played the piano before, and you can do a functional brain scan on them, and then you can teach them one-handed scales and chords, and they'll practice those chords 2 hours a day for 5 days. At the end of 5 days, they grow a whole new set of circuits on the opposite side of the brain. Well, that makes sense. You learn something new. Learning is making new synaptic connections. You get your body involved with some instruction. When you get your body involved, you're going to have a new experience. Experience enriches the brain. You pay attention to what you're doing. You've got to pay attention and stay present. And if you repeat it over and over again, firing and wiring, you assemble new networks of neurons equal to your experience. Nothing new there, but you can take a group of people and you can have them close their eyes. Do a brain scan on them before the experiment. 5 days later, do a brain scan after. And for 2 hours a day, they mentally rehearse playing those scales and chords. At the end of 5 days, they grow the same amount of circuits in their brain as the people actually physically doing the exercise. So what's the relevance? Number one, when you're truly focused and you're truly paying attention, your brain does not know the difference between what's going on out there and what's going on in here. So the thought becomes the experience, and the brain looks like it's been playing the piano for the last 5 days, but they never lift a finger. Now, from a biological standpoint, our brains are a record of the past. They're an artifact of everything we've learned and experienced to this moment. When we prime the brain to change its circuitry before the experience, now the brain is no longer a record of the past. It's now a map to the future. And so as we warm up those brain circuits, it's more easy for us to slip into a supernatural behavior. If you take those people and you set them from the piano, and they've never played the piano before, but they've been mentally rehearsing for the last 5 days, they'll play those scales and chords like magic. They just learned how to do it just by changing their internal state. Take a group of men. You can have them close their eyes and for an hour a day, mentally rehearse doing bicep curls over and over again, and they add an emotional component called harder, stronger, more intense, and they put themselves in that first-person internal mental image. At the end of 2 weeks, they have a 13.5 increase in muscle strength, and they've never performed the activity. Not only is the brain changed to look like the experience has already occurred, now the body has changed by thought alone. The body looks like it's been working out for the last 2 weeks. So then the power of mental rehearsal, of imaging primes, the brain and body to look like the future has already occurred. And when you set the extent of your limit. And then they said, let's take a control group, just a group of people that are just average people, and we'll use the monks, and we'll teach them how to do this thing called focused concentration, what science is now called paying attention. By the way, the average human being loses their attention span 6 to 10 times a minute. That's why only a few subatomic particles actually pay attention to our mind. So he said, okay, we're going to hook these guys up to these brain scans, particular ones called EEGs. And EEGs measure electromagnetic frequency that the brain emits. And so they took 256 electrodes, and they covered their whole entire head. Can you picture these monks with the things? And then they ran all the feedback into a computer that created a holographic picture of the brain, and they were able to begin to measure brain activity. They said to these monks, be your normal self. They took 8 of them. Be your normal self. And then they said, okay, now listen, you guys. Pay attention to compassion. Just close your eyes and pay attention to compassion. The moment they did that, all of a sudden, the frontal lobe lit up so much that the scientists had never seen that type of activity in that part of the brain. Now, then they took the control group and they said, all right, you guys, pay attention to one thing. And of course, what happened? My back hurts. How long is this going to take? I don't really want to do this. Am I doing it right? I wonder what my kid's doing. I gotta buy dinner, all that stuff. And guess what happened to their frontal lobe? Meh, nothing. Now, in one particular monk, there's a part of the frontal lobe on the left side, which is really the happy spot in the brain. And this guy's left frontal lobe was so ignited that the scientists said, this guy's gotta be the happiest guy in the world. They'd never seen activity like this before. But then the scientists began to think about this. And what they said was, maybe paying attention and concentration and observation is a skill, just like tennis or golf. And you can improve it if you keep practicing it. Now think about this. The brain is the instrument that we use. It's the machinery for us to process thought. How many people accept that? And it also has some automatic processes that allow us to function. But for the most part, it's the greatest area in the body where there's the greatest number of neurons clustered together. And where you have the greatest number of neurons clustered together, you have the greatest intelligence. So the brain is the central clearinghouse of intelligence. Mind, by the way, is what the brain does. Mind is the brain in action. It's the brain at work. When we can measure a working brain, we're studying mind. So mind is when the brain is in action. So when we're using functional brain scans and we're studying how the brain works, we're studying this concept called mind. Then here's my question. If the brain is the instrument for intelligence or processing thought, and mind is what the brain does, if you can improve the way your brain works, who's doing the improving? And it's that nasty 13-letter word called consciousness. That's the only solution. Consciousnesses are self-aware, free-willed individual that is really not the body, is not the brain, and is not the mind. As a matter of fact, consciousness is what manipulates the brain to produce mind. The brain processes 400 billion bits of information every second, but we're only aware of about 2,000 of those 400 billion bits of information. And you know what those 2,000 bits of information have to do with? 3 things, and only 3 things: the body, the environment, and time. That's it. Does your back hurt? Do you have a headache? Are you tired? Is it too cold in here? Is it too bright in here? Is it too dark in here? Do you like the way the person smells sitting next to you? Do you even like the person next to you? How long's this guy gonna talk before we can break? And that's where all of our self-awareness is on. It's only on the body, the environment, and time. And yet billions of bits of information is being processed by the brain. Now, when we can take consciousness, self-awareness, and move it away from the body, the environment, and time, we no longer have to live by the laws of the body, the environment, and time. And when we're able to do that, we begin to open the door to walk into the quantum field. So then the first step to change is becoming conscious of those unconscious states of mind and body. Most people don't like to do this. Everybody knows this, that you keep switching on that system for an extended period of time, and you live by the arousal of fear, the arousal of pain, the arousal of suffering, the arousal of aggression. It takes energy to activate those latent systems, and when we do that, our immune system is compromised. The energy that's mobilized for emergency, for the threat in the outer environment, compromises the energy in our inner environment, and we are then more susceptible to the conditions in our outer environment. And as Greg said, you have to look at to see what keeps you in balance. And stress and living in survival is when you're not that balanced, not that homeostasis. We can tolerate that short term, but if you keep exposing yourself to the same stimulation, or you have a thought of some worst-case scenario in your mind, you're actually knocking your brain and body out of balance by thought alone. And this is where it gets dangerous, because the conditioning response, the worst-case scenario, the image we create in our mind, and the emotion that we perceive is the stimulus response that's conditioning the body to subconsciously live by the arousal of fear, as an example. So that internal environment becomes compromised and the immune system dials down. And why is that? Because we are more reactionary or responding more to the environment. So, and Greg, you know this, that in a time like this, when everybody's feeling fear, that seems natural and normal. But what we're looking for is supernatural. And that's the new consciousness that has to emerge as a result of this wake-up call. This is a perfect opportunity for people to be in a retreat, but instead of being in some tent or some hut in the Himalayas, or being in some hotel, you're in the comfort of your own home. And it's true, you break from routine and you're not going to the same place and seeing the same people and doing the same thing. And that causes you to step outside of familiar territory. So then when we practice the inward work, when we practice meditation, as an example, and you have the ability to take a moment and be present and truly open your heart, our research shows that you are going to actually create a state of information that's no longer coming from your outer world, that there's danger in there. But when you start falling into the present moment and opening your heart, your immune system in 4 days can strengthen by 50%. Now, I know most people will say, I don't really want to do it now, it's just too hard. No. This is the time. This is the time that we've been practicing for. This is the time where it matters the most.